It's Pete from Cheap Homesteading. I'm in the pasture and I'm going to work on the old Massey Harris today. I've totally neglected this thing. This summer was so busy, so I haven't used it all summer, and the battery's dead now and the starter really doesn't click over, so it needs to be rebuilt. So I ordered a kit for it and we're going to take the starter off and rebuild it. So we're going to disconnect the battery terminal. I know the battery is fully dead, but we're just going to make sure. I don't know what it is, it's been so busy I haven't had a chance to really work on the tractor. So I want this tractor up and running for winter, and I possibly might look for a blower for it, because last year trying to get back to the sugar shack, that was just crazy without a blower. So I have a tractor, I really should be able to use it. So we're just gonna get the tractor up and running. Okay, so it's a 5/8 wrench to remove the cable. You know, this tractor sat all summer and I hope it hasn't gained any more problems just sitting. You know, when you have a tractor and it sits and you just don't use it, it's way, way worse for it. Put that back on here. The one wrench you didn't bring, you have to go back and get. My gracious. This is really one of the easiest starters to remove. You just got to remove that bolt and that bolt. So there you go, the starter is off. Wow, looks like someone had an issue with the end of that starter. Well, that's not the problem with it, so we're going to take this back and we're going to rebuild it. It's going to be a couple days before we get back with the starter, so we're going to shove a bag in the hole just to keep critters and moisture out of it. Okay, so there you go. We got the starter off. I'm going to rebuild it, and we're going to throw this back on, and we're going to see if we can get the tractor going next weekend. I really want to start using it. If you have a tractor, you might as well be able to use it. I finally got back to my starter rebuild on my Massey Ferguson 50 or Massey Harris 50, whichever one. They're the same tractor. About half a year ago, I ordered a rebuild kit for a Delco Remy starter. This one happens to be 1107 654. A lot of them are the same. It's just the configuration of the nose and all that on the starter. So I ordered one online. It was the only one that was available at the time. I couldn't find any more. And it's not much of a kit, but you got new brushes, bushings, and a few trinkets. So we're gonna rebuild this thing. Okay, the first thing you do is make a good mark between the housings and the cover, so you can actually put it back in the same orientation. So on the back of here, you have two bolts, and they're, I don't know what they are. They're probably 3/8 or something. We'll go get 3/8 wrench. Okay, so yeah, okay, so it's 3/8. You loosen these two screws off. You're gonna have long screws in there. You pull them out. You see this in here, you have all that rust in here, and the brushes aren't returning fully to your stator. Okay, so now I'm gonna pull this washer off. I'm gonna set it there. So you get a screwdriver in here and pry this out. Sometimes comes easy, sometimes doesn't. You take the nose off, and now you can shove the whole stator out of it. You can see there's a lot of rust on here. We're going to clean that up. But the main part is where your brushes run, and your brushes run on here. We're going to clean up the stator, and then we're going to replace the brushes here. You know how organized I am. I don't have any emery cloth, but we are going to use 80 grit aluminum oxide, I guess. Better than nothing. Okay, we're going to clean up this area, And we're just going to take some of the rust off there. If it makes a bad contact here, it's not going to start. After it's turning over, it's not so bad, but right when you go to start it, if it doesn't have contact, she ain't going to start for you. Okay. Clean this off. Wipe it. Yeah, you don't want to sand too crazy on here, but you can see how much it's wore because there's a ridge right here where your brushes don't run. We cleaned up this area. We cleaned up a lot of the rust off here, and we're going to set that over here. I'm going to clean up the magnet surfaces. Pin here and a pin here that hold the brush assemblies in. You come from this side and tap out the pin and then take the brush out. You flip it over and leave the pin hang out past the bench. You get your punch and you tap it down. Flip it over and then you can pull out the pin. Now if you pull down on this, your brush assembly comes out. And see what part of the problem is? This spring rusted out and it's lost its springiness. So the brush doesn't try to return and rest on here, so there's a little bit of a gap, and that's why when you turn it on and it won't go, and you hit it with a hammer, and then all of a sudden it's because you're jarring that brush and touching there. If we replace the brushes and the springs, it should work. My plan is to use this tractor to clean my laneway in the winter, so I want it to be pretty reliable. So that's why I wanted to put a kit in it. I don't want to have to be out there in the cold hitting it with a hammer to get it going. Okay, so now we have one brush assembly loose. I'm going to see what they sent me because I haven't even looked. Okay. We'll get a rag. We're going to lie this out here. We're going to remove the wire that hooks to this brush. Okay, don't lose the screw. And we're going to set it down here. You're going to clean up all these connections as you go. You want to make sure it has a good connection. Okay, so you get your new arm and you see your brush. There's an angle on the brush and you want the angle, the higher part, to be towards the pivot point on your arm. Okay, so now you stick it through the wire here. And then through the brush. And then into the arm. You might have to hold that wire with your thumb and then tighten it up. So then that goes back in there. So now we get the other side of the brush. And we have to loosen this off. There we go. Okay. So do you see the higher end goes towards your pivot? So when I get the new brush, I have to put the higher end to the pivot. Clean off the rust on these areas because I want the brush to pivot nicely. I don't want any restriction. Because once it gets restriction, it doesn't return properly and then it doesn't sit up against your stator and it doesn't start. And then I reinstall the new brush. Okay, so I have to try to hold the wire and tighten this up. There we go. Gonna clean up the inside of the bracket where the arms pivot. We're gonna wire wheel the pin, and I give it a slight coating of silicone grease. And then we get the 2 halves of your brush here. Wow, that's gonna be hard to show you. Okay, so I got one brush, the other brush, and I got the spring on either side. And the spring goes all the way up to the end here. And this one, it goes all the way to the end. So now you have to try to push down on this, get it in the bracket, and get the first brush housing started with the pin, and then move it around and get it going through this piece, and then you get the whole thing and you keep wiggling till it pushes all the way in. And now this thing's got lots and lots of spring tension on it. It's going to stay seated against the stator. It's not going to have a bad connection. So now we got one more to do. You see the difference in the spring tension? Here's the new one. Here's the old one. It doesn't even return anymore. That's why it isn't starting. Okay, so now we're going to pound this pin out. We're going to tap. You know what? A lot of these old starters are not hard to rebuild yourself. You're just a little bit finicky trying to get the springs in and everything. But you could save yourself a lot of money, because I think this kit was 20 bucks, which was pricey enough, mind you, but the whole starter, I think, was $300 and some dollars. And the problem with me is most of the stuff comes out of the United States. And the shipping on heavy parts like a starter is incredible. So you end up tacking on almost the price of the starter shipping. So that's no good either. So if you're able to rebuild your starters, you can save yourself tons and tons of money. Because these tractors, you can't just go to the dealer anymore. You can in some circumstances, but most times a lot of these parts are obsolete now and you can't get them. A plastic one, and then you push and it's all the way through. You spring back really nice and firm. That's what you want. Get a little bit of dielectric grease. I'm gonna put it on this surface to keep it from corroding. I'm gonna start sliding the stator in there. So what you wanna do is set it up on the shaft, and then you kinda pull back on all the arms at the exact same time. Man, which is hard as it is. There we go. That would have been difficult to see for sure. So now you can see where the brushes run. The brushes run nice and flat on the stator. If you have the brush on backwards, it won't sit flat like that. They're all sitting really nice. Turn it over, see that it's good. We're gonna clean that washer off and we're gonna stick it here. Gonna use a bit of silicone grease on the bearing. You don't want a ton of it in there because you don't want it to actually gum up and then get sticky. Okay, so now you put your washer on here. Then you put your nose, you put the nose back in here. And you line up your marks. And there's a little dowel in here that has to line up. Get your safety glasses. And we're gonna give this a little tap. There we go, it's in. You slide it in and line up the marks you made on this housing to here. And then when you shove the bolt through, you should be able to get them to start. Okay, so we're gonna tighten this up. You don't want the plate to be cockeyed and not sitting in straight, so you evenly tighten them up. So there you go. The starter is rebuilt. Okay, so we're gonna head out and put this on the tractor. So we're gonna throw the starter up in here. Okay, we'll tighten these up. It'd be really nice to get it actually back together that I can use it, because I don't own a new tractor or anything, but it's nice to actually have a tractor. You clean up this connection real good on here and on the starter. .5/8 wrench. We're almost there. If everything goes good, it should start. There we go, we got it out of the pasture. That's awesome. I'm pretty happy about that. Now we can do a little bit of a service and get a snow blower for it and actually use it. If I can get a little blower for this thing, that would help me out a lot. And I think I'm gonna do a few modifications to the 3-point hitch loader, just so it is more usable. But otherwise, I really do like the tractor. It's a pretty good old tractor. So that's about enough for today, and you guys have a good one.